on the outer rim of human-controlled space, where the stars burned cold and the silence between them felt heavier than steel. Orbital station Viridia hung like a rusted nail in the void. Its corridors were narrow. Its lights flickered more often than not, and the air always carried the faint tang of recycled oxygen and burnt wiring. It was a place people passed through, never stayed, and certainly never called home. But in Sector 7, near the old cargo bays where the gravity plating groaned underfoot, there was a girl no one would go near. Her name was Lyria, though few aboard dared speak it. She moved like a ghost through the crowded walkways, her bare feet silent against the grated floors. Her skin shimmered faintly, like moonlight caught in river water, and her eyes, deep and shifting like galaxies seen through a cracked lens, made even the toughest station guards look away. Her ears rose to delicate points beneath a curtain of silver-white hair, and when she walked, the air around her seemed to still, as if holding its breath. Whispers followed her everywhere. Some said she was the last of an ancient race, the so-called elves of the outer spiral, long thought extinct after the Great Silence wiped out whole civilizations centuries ago. Others claimed she carried a curse, that just looking at her too long could unravel your mind. A few even swore they'd seen her vanish into thin air during a power outage, only to reappear hours later, calm and untouched. Whatever the truth, the result was the same. People avoided her. Vendors shut their stalls when she neared. Children were pulled close by their parents. Even the station's stray cats hissed and fled at the sight of her. Except for one man. His name was Daniel. He wasn't special, not by station standards. Mid-30s, wiry build with calloused hands from years of hauling crates and patching hull breaches. He wore a faded blue jumpsuit with grease stains on the knees and a name tag that had lost half its letters. He worked the night shift in Cargo Bay 4, loading and unloading freight for freighters that rarely stayed longer than a fuel-up and a system check. Daniel didn't believe in curses. He believed in broken pipes, faulty wiring, and the fact that everyone gets lonely sometimes. He first noticed Lyria a week after she arrived on a derelict scout vessel that had drifted into Viridia's docking arms with no crew, no logs, and only her inside, curled up in the cockpit like she'd been sleeping for years. Security had scanned her, questioned her, and finally let her stay, mostly because no one knew what else to do with her. Daniel saw her one evening near Viewport 17, the one with the hairline crack running down the center. She stood there for hours, just staring out at the black. He watched from a distance, unsure whether to approach, but something about the way she held herself, not proud, not scared, just waiting, made him step forward. "Hey," he said, stopping a few feet away. "You look like you missed the sky." She turned slowly. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, Daniel thought he saw stars blink inside them. But she didn't flinch, didn't hiss, didn't vanish. She just looked at him, really looked, like she was seeing more than his jumpsuit and tired eyes. "Most people don't talk to me," she said. Her voice was soft, almost musical, but with an edge of something old and worn. "Well, most people are idiots," Daniel replied without thinking. Then he winced, expecting her to walk away. Instead, the corner of her mouth lifted, just slightly. He didn't know what to say next, so he did the only thing that felt right. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small thermos. Synth tea. Bitter, lukewarm, but better than station water. "Want some?" She hesitated, then nodded. They sat on the floor by the cracked viewport, sipping from the same thermos. No one else came near. The usual bustle of the corridor seemed to fade, as if the station itself was giving them space. After a while, Daniel noticed something at her feet. At first he thought it was a scarf or a shadow, but then it moved. A small creature uncurled from beneath the hem of her long coat. It was no bigger than a house cat, covered in scales the color of smoldering coals. Its eyes were golden, slit-pupiled, and far too knowing for something so small. It blinked at Daniel, then let out a soft sound like a purr mixed with a crackle of fire. "Is that—" A dragon, Lyria nodded. "His name is Ember." Daniel stared. Dragons weren't real. They were stories told to kids on colony worlds, myths from Earth's forgotten past. Yet here one was, real as the bolt in his wrench, watching him with ancient eyes. "Does he—" "Blatantly liars," Lyria said simply. Ember stretched, then patted over and nudged Daniel's boot with his snout. The touch was warm, almost comforting. Daniel reached down slowly, and the dragon allowed him to scratch behind one tiny horn. "You've had him long since before the silence," she said. Daniel didn't know what the silence was, but he didn't ask. Some things didn't need explaining. From that night on, Daniel made a habit of stopping by Viewport 17. Sometimes he brought synth tea, sometimes old music, chips from Earth, jazz, blues, even a little rock. Lyria never said much, but she always listened, and Ember always came out, curling up between them like a living hearth. The station crew noticed. Of course they did. Rumors shifted. Now they said Daniel was cursed too, or that he'd made a deal with something unnatural. Some avoided him as well. His shift partners grew quiet around him. His usual lunch spot in the mess hall stayed empty when he sat down. But Daniel didn't care. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. One night, as they sat watching a distant nebula pulse in violet waves, Lyria spoke without looking at him. "Why aren't you afraid of me?" Daniel thought about it. "I don't know. Maybe because you don't act like a monster. Maybe because you drink terrible tea like the rest of us, or maybe because when I'm near you, it feels like I've finally stopped drifting." She turned to him then, her eyes softer than he'd ever seen them. "That's strange," she said, "because when I'm near you, it feels like home." Ember let out a low rumble as if in agreement. Daniel smiled. "Then we're even." Far below them, in the station's lower decks, alarms suddenly blared, short, sharp bursts signaling an unscheduled docking. A Qatari warship, sleek and black as obsidian, had just locked onto Bay 3 without clearance. Its transponder was dark. Its weapons were hot. Lyria went very still. "They've found me," she whispered. Daniel stood, offering her his hand. "Then we'd better be ready." She looked at his hand, then at his face. For the first time she took it, and in that moment, in the dim light of a dying station, two outcasts, one human, one alien, with a dragon no bigger than a cat at their feet, stood together against the coming storm. No one else on Viridia knew it yet, but everything was about to change. The Qatari warship clung to Viridia like a leech to flesh. Its hull was smooth and black, absorbing the station's lights instead of reflecting them. No one had seen a ship like it in decades, not since the border wars ended in uneasy silence. And now it was here, docking without permission. Weapons charged, comms dark. Panic spread fast. Station guards scrambled to Bay 3, pulse rifles in hand. Civilians locked their doors. Even the usual black market traders in the lower decks went quiet. Everyone knew the Qatari didn't come for trade. They came for blood. But Daniel wasn't thinking about the warship. He was thinking about Lyria. She stood frozen by the viewport, her silver skin gone pale, her hands clenched at her sides. Ember had coiled tight around her wrist, his tiny body rigid, scales flaring faintly red. She wasn't afraid. Daniel could see that. She was bracing, like she'd been expecting this. "Who are they?" Daniel asked, voice low. Lyria didn't look at him. "They're hunters, and I'm the last thing they need to erase." Before Daniel could ask more, boots echoed down the corridor. 3 station guards rounded the corner, weapons raised. "Alien," one barked. "You're coming with us. Governor Crow's orders." Lyria didn't move. The guard stepped closer. "I said move." Daniel stepped between them. "She hasn't done anything." "Stay out of this, Hauler," the guard snapped. "This isn't your business. It is now," Daniel said, standing his ground. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the lead guard sighed and tapped his comm. "We've got resistance. Send backup." Within minutes, 6 more guards arrived, along with a stern-faced woman in a crisp gray uniform. Commander Elise Morgan, head of station security. She studied Lyria with cold eyes, then turned to Daniel. "You're dismissed, Hauler. Go back to your bay." "No," Daniel said. Elise's jaw tightened. "That wasn't a request, and I'm not leaving," Daniel replied. Elise stared at him, then at Lyria. "Fine, you can both come, but if she so much as twitches wrong, you'll be locked up too." They were marched through the station's winding corridors, past shuttered shops and silent mess halls. People watched from behind glass, faces tight with fear or curiosity. Lyria walked with her head high, Ember hidden beneath her sleeve. Daniel stayed close, heart pounding but resolve steady. They ended up in Sector 9, a sealed-off wing used for quarantine and high-risk detainees. The air was colder here, the lights dimmer. Elise led them to a small room with reinforced walls and a single bench. "You'll stay here until the governor decides what to do," she said. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." The door hissed shut behind them. Daniel let out a breath. "You knew they'd come, didn't you?" he said. Lyria sat on the bench, pulling Ember into her lap. He uncurled slightly, letting out a soft rumble. "Yes." The Qatari have been hunting my kind for centuries. They believe we caused the Great Silence. What's the Great Silence? A time when stars went dark across the spiral. Whole worlds vanished. Not destroyed, just gone. No signals, no ruins, no bodies. Only silence. My people, the Star Weavers, tried to stop it. But something broke. And when it did, the galaxy blamed us. So they're here to finish the job. Lyria nodded. And they think I hold the last spark of what we once were. Daniel sat beside her. Then why haven't you run? Because running won't stop them. And because... She looked at him. Because for the first time, I don't want to be alone when it ends. Daniel didn't know what to say to that, so he just sat with her shoulder to shoulder as the station hummed around them. Hours passed. Then a soft knock at the door. Daniel tensed, but it wasn't guards. It was a young woman with short brown hair and nervous eyes. Maya, a junior tech from comms. She held a small tray with 2 cups and a wrapped packet. I brought you something, she stammered, glancing down the hall. They're not supposed to feed you until tomorrow, but... Thank you, Daniel said, taking the tray. Maya hesitated. They're talking about handing her over to the Qatari. Governor Crow says it's the only way to keep the station safe. Lyria's expression didn't change. Maya looked at her. I don't believe the rumors. My grandmother used to tell stories about elves, how they sang stars into being, how they healed broken worlds. She said they weren't monsters. They were guardians. Lyria finally looked up. Your grandmother was right. Maya nodded quickly, then slipped away before anyone saw her. Daniel unwrapped the packet. Real bread, not synth loaf. He broke it in half and handed 1 piece to Lyria. You've got friends already, he said. She took the bread, her fingers brushing his. Maybe home isn't so far away after all. That night, as Daniel dozed on the bench, Lyria stayed awake watching the door. Ember lay across her knees, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Then just before dawn cycle, the alarms blared again. Long, piercing wails that meant breach. The door slid open. Not guards this time. Qatari warriors, tall, armored in black chitin with 4-fingered hands and eyes like polished obsidian. They carried energy whips that crackled with violet light. Behind them stood a figure taller than the rest. Warlord Vector, his face scarred, his voice like grinding stone. Lyria of Aerthos, he said, you will come with us. Daniel woke instantly, stepping in front of Lyria. She's not going anywhere. Vector laughed, a dry, hollow sound. The human thinks he can stop you. I don't have to stop all of you, Daniel said, fists clenched. Just the first one who tries to touch her. For a moment, the Qatari didn't move. Then Vector raised a hand. Take them both. 2 warriors lunged. Daniel braced. But before they reached him, the lights flickered, then died. In the sudden dark, a low growl filled the room. Not from Daniel, not from the Qatari, from Ember. The little dragon leapt from Lyria's lap, landing between Daniel and the warriors. His body swelled, not in size but in presence. His scales blazed with inner fire, casting long shadows on the walls. His eyes burned gold, ancient and furious. The Qatari froze. Starfire, one whispered. Vector's voice turned sharp. Kill it. They fired. Plasma bolts shot toward Ember, but stopped midair, suspended in a shimmering dome of light that hadn't been there a second before. The energy twisted, then dissolved into harmless sparks. Lyria stood now, her eyes glowing like twin suns. You think fire is all he has, she said. You forget what we truly are. She raised a hand. The air hummed. The floor trembled, and from the walls, from the vents, from the very metal of the station, threads of light began to weave themselves together. Silver, blue, gold, forming a net of pure energy around the Qatari. They struggled, but the net held. Vector snarled. Witch. No, Lyria said softly. I'm what's left of the truth. Then she turned to Daniel. Are you all right? He nodded, stunned. Yeah, just, wow. She almost smiled. But their relief was short-lived. From the corridor, a new voice crackled over the station's emergency channel. Governor Crow. Lyria, this is your last warning. Surrender yourself and your creature or I will vent Sector 9 into space. Daniel's blood ran cold. Lyria closed her eyes. Then she looked at Ember, who gave a single, slow nod. Fine, she said into the comm. I'll come. But only if Daniel walks with me. There was a pause. Then Crow's voice, tight with suspicion. Agreed. The energy net vanished. The Qatari stumbled back, wary but unharmed. Vector watched Lyria like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. As they walked through the station, escorted by both Qatari and human guards, Daniel stayed at Lyria's side. People watched from behind glass, some fearful, some curious, a few even hopeful. At the main docking bay, the Qatari ship waited, ramp open like a hungry mouth. Vector turned to Lyria. "Once aboard, you will be bound. Your dragon, too," Ember hissed. But Lyria placed a calming hand on his head. "And if I refuse, then your human dies first." Daniel stepped forward. "Don't you dare!" Lyria stopped him with a look. "It's all right." She walked up the ramp, Ember on her shoulder, Daniel right behind her. But as they crossed the threshold, something changed. The air grew heavy. The lights on the Qatari ship dimmed. And deep in the station's core, something ancient stirred, something that had been waiting. Lyria felt it. Her steps slowed. "What is it?" Daniel whispered. She didn't answer, but her eyes for the first time held fear, not of the Qatari, of what was coming next. The moment Lyria stepped onto the Qatari warship, the air turned thick and cold. The walls pulsed with a faint violet light like a slow heartbeat. Daniel stayed close behind her, his hands empty but his stance ready. Ember sat on Lyria's shoulder, scales dimmed to a dull red, eyes narrowed. Vector led them down a narrow corridor lined with armed warriors. Their armor clicked softly with each step, and their eyes never left Lyria. They reached a circular chamber at the ship's center, a holding cell with energy bars and no visible door. "You will wait here," Vector said, "until we reach Qatari space. You won't make it that far," Lyria replied, her voice calm. Vector sneered. Brave words for a prisoner. He turned to leave, but before he could, the ship shuddered. Not from engines or docking. From something deeper. Something wrong. Alarms blared, sharp, panicked tones unlike the station's steady warnings. The lights flickered, then shifted from violet to a sickly gray. The warriors exchanged uneasy glances. "What is this?" Vector growled into his comm. No answer came. Then the floor beneath them rippled, like water disturbed by a stone. Daniel stumbled, catching himself on the wall. Lyria stood firm, her eyes wide. "It's here," she whispered. Before anyone could react, the energy bars of the cell vanished, not deactivated, gone as if erased. At the same time, the warriors' weapons sparked and died in their hands. A shadow filled the corridor. Not a shape, not a form, just an absence. Where it passed, light dimmed, sound faded, even the air seemed thinner. The hollow. Lyria's breath caught. Ember let out a low, warning growl, his body swelling slightly, scales flaring back to life. Vector drew a blade from his belt, black metal etched with old runes. "What is that? The end of everything," Lyria said. "And it followed me." The hollow moved closer. The Qatari warriors fired their backup weapons, but the bolts vanished before they reached it. One warrior stepped forward, shouting a battle cry, but the sound died in his throat. He collapsed, eyes open but empty, as if his soul had been scooped out. Panic erupted. Warriors scrambled back. Vector roared orders, but his voice sounded distant, muffled. Daniel grabbed Lyria's arm. "We have to go," where Lyria asked. "It's already inside the ship. Then we fight it here." She looked at him, surprised. "You can't fight nothing." "Maybe not," Daniel said. "But you're not nothing. And neither is he." He nodded at Ember. Lyria hesitated. Then she nodded. She stepped forward, placing herself between the hollow and the others. Ember leapt from her shoulder, landing on the floor. His body began to change. Not just growing, unfolding. Wings spread wide, made of light and memory. His scales blazed like a dying star, casting warmth into the chilling void. He was no longer cat-sized. He was a dragon of myth, ancient and proud, filling the chamber with his presence. The hollow paused. For the first time, it seemed uncertain. Lyria raised her hands. The air around her shimmered. Threads of silver light spun from her fingertips, weaving into a shield. Not of force, but of memory. Images flickered within it. Stars being born, forests growing on dead worlds, songs sung in forgotten tongues. "This is what you destroy," she said. "Not just life, but meaning." The hollow surged forward. Ember roared. A sound that wasn't sound but feeling. Pure defiance. Fire erupted from his mouth, not hot but bright. It didn't burn flesh. It burned lies. Where the fire touched the hollow, the void recoiled. Patches of color returned to the walls. The fallen warrior gasped, sitting up, confused but alive. Vector stared, stunned. What kind of power is this? The kind your ancestors once served? Lyria said without looking at him. The Starweavers didn't control the stars. They reminded them they mattered. Daniel watched, heart pounding. He didn't understand the magic, the history, the weight of it all. But he understood this. Lyria was giving everything to hold back the dark. And she was tiring. Her light flickered. Ember's fire dimmed. The hollow pressed its advantage. Daniel didn't think. He ran, not away, toward Lyria. He grabbed her hand, and in that touch, something changed. A new thread of light joined hers. Golden, warm, human. Memories flooded the shield. A child laughing under an open sky, hands fixing a broken engine, sharing tea by a cracked viewport. Simple things. Small things, but full of life. Lyria looked at him, eyes wide. You said home isn't a place, Daniel said, breathless. It's people, so let me be part of yours. The shield brightened. Ember roared again, stronger this time. The hollow let out a sound like tearing fabric, a scream of frustration. It wasn't used to being seen. Not truly seen. Victor watched the two of them, alien and human, standing together against the end of all things. Something in his chest cracked open. He stepped forward. No one expected it. He placed his hand on Lyria's other side. His memories joined the weave. Qatari children dancing under twin moons, warriors laying down arms after a long peace, elders telling stories of a time before fear. The shield became a tapestry, and the hollow stopped. It hovered before them, no longer attacking, just watching. Lyria lowered her hand slightly. You don't want to destroy, she said softly. You're lost. The hollow pulsed once, slowly. Then, without warning, it retreated, flowing backward down the corridor, vanishing into the ship's depths. The lights returned to normal. The air warmed. The warriors helped their fallen comrade to his feet, dazed but whole. Silence fell. Vector removed his hand. He looked at Lyria, then at Daniel. You fight with stories, he said, not weapons. Sometimes that's the only thing that works, Daniel replied. Vector studied them both. For centuries, my people believed the Starweavers brought the silence. But you bring light, Lyria nodded. The silence wasn't our doing. It was the hollow's. It feeds on fear, on forgetting. And when enough worlds forgot who they were, it grew strong enough to swallow stars. So you've been running from it, no? Lyria said. I've been waiting for someone to stand with me. Vector was quiet for a long time. Then he turned to his warriors. Release the human. Stand down. They obeyed without question. But before anyone could relax, the ship's comm crackled. Governor Crow's voice sharp with fear. Qatari vessel, this is Viridia Station. You are ordered to depart immediately. Your presence is no longer welcome. Vector frowned. Why, because the hollow didn't just follow you onto the ship, Lyria said, her voice tight. It's still on the station. Daniel's blood ran cold. They raced back to the ramp. Below, through the viewport, Viridia looked wrong. Sections of the station were dark. Not just unlit, but empty. Windows showed nothing but black. People ran in the corridors, but their movements were slow, dreamlike. It's spreading, Lyria whispered. We have to go back, Daniel said. Vector hesitated. My ship is not built for rescue. Then lend us a shuttle, Daniel snapped. Or stand aside. Vector looked at Lyria. She met his gaze. After a moment, he nodded. Take the scout. But hurry. If the hollow consumes the station's core, there will be nothing left to save. Minutes later, Daniel and Lyria were flying back toward Viridia in a small Qatari shuttle. Ember curled at their feet. The station loomed ahead, half of it swallowed in unnatural shadow. As they docked, alarms wailed. The air smelled stale, wrong. They ran through the corridors. People they passed moved like ghosts, eyes blank, voices silent. Even the cats were still. Sector 9 was worse. The walls were crumbling, not from damage, but from absence, as if the metal itself was forgetting how to be metal. In the heart of it all, near the old reactor core, the hollow waited. It had grown. It filled the chamber, a swirling mass of nothingness, and at its center, barely visible, was a faint pulse like a dying star. That's the station's core memory, Lyria said. If it goes out, Viridia won't just die. It will never have existed. How do we stop it? We don't fight it, she said. We remind it. She stepped forward, Ember at her side. Daniel followed. The hollow turned toward them. Lyria began to sing, not a song of power but of home, of silver forests and starlit rivers, of a girl who once watched the sky from a broken viewport. Daniel joined in, not with words, but with hums, with memories of earth songs, of laughter in cargo bays, of shared tea and quiet nights. Ember added his voice, a deep, resonant thrum that vibrated through the floor. The hollow trembled, and for the first time it made a sound of its own, not a scream, a sigh, like it remembered what it was before it became empty. Lyria reached out, not with force, but with an open hand. "Come back," she whispered. "You don't have to be alone." The hollow pulsed once. Then it flowed toward her, not to consume, but to join. Light returned to the chamber. Color flooded back into the walls. The station groaned, then settled, as if breathing again. In the silence that followed, Daniel looked at Lyria. "Is it over for now?" she said. "But the hollow will always be out there, waiting for the next time the galaxy forgets." "Then we'll remind it," Daniel said. Ember nuzzled his hand. And somewhere deep in the station, a light flickered on, then another. And another. Life returned, not because of weapons or war, but because two outcasts chose to stand together, and dared to believe that even the darkest void could remember what it meant to be whole. In the days after the hollow retreated, Viridia Station did not return to normal. It became something new. Lights that had flickered for years now glowed steady and warm. The air smelled less of ozone and more of something faintly sweet like rain on dry earth. People walked the corridors with their heads higher, speaking to strangers, sharing food, even laughing in the mess halls. The fear that had clung to the station like rust was gone, replaced by a quiet wonder. But Lyria knew it wouldn't last. She sat alone in the observation lounge, the same cracked viewport before her, Ember curled in her lap. Daniel had been pulled into meetings with Station Command. Governor Crow, Commander Elise, even Vector, who refused to leave until he understood what had happened. Lyria didn't blame them. The hollow had touched them all, even if they didn't remember it clearly. What they remembered was light, song, a feeling of being seen. But Lyria remembered more. She remembered the hollow's sigh, the way it had leaned into her hand like a lost child. It hadn't been destroyed. It had been changed, and that meant it could change again. Ember lifted his head, golden eyes watching her. "You feel it too?" His thoughts whispered in her mind. It is still out there, waiting. Yes, she thought back, and it's not the only one. Deep in the station's core, where the old reactor hummed beneath layers of steel and memory, something stirred, not the hollow this time. Something older, something that had been sleeping while the void fed, and now it was waking. Daniel found her just before shift change. He looked tired but calm, his jumpsuit clean for once, his boots polished. He sat beside her without a word, handing her a fresh thermos of synth tea. "They want to make you an advisor," he said. "Official station business, full clearance, even a private quarters near the gardens." Lyria smiled faintly. "And what did you say?" "I told them you don't take orders, but you might listen if they ask nicely." "Good answer." They sat in silence for a while, watching the new star, the one born from the hollow, twinkle in the distance. It pulsed softly like a heartbeat. "It's beautiful," Daniel said. "It's lonely," Lyria replied. Before he could ask what she meant, the station lights dimmed. Not like before, no panic, no alarms. Just a slow fade, as if the power was being gently drawn away. Ember stood, scales flaring red. Daniel tensed. "Not again." "No," Lyria said. "This is different." She rose, walking to the center of the lounge. The floor beneath her feet grew warm. Lines of light traced across the metal. Not silver or gold, but deep blue like ocean depths. They spread outward, forming patterns no human hand had carved. "What is that?" Daniel asked. "The station's memory," Lyria said, "and it's calling me." Without another word, she turned and walked toward the maintenance lift that led to the lower core. Daniel followed. Ember flew ahead, his light cutting through the dimming corridors. As they descended, the air grew thick with the scent of old metal and something else, like wet stone and distant thunder. The walls hummed, not with machinery, but with something alive. When they reached level 0, the deepest part of Viridia, where even engineers rarely went, they found the source. The core chamber was vast, a cathedral of steel and pipes. At its center stood the original reactor, long since replaced by newer models. But this one wasn't dead. It glowed faintly, pulsing in time with the blue lines on the floor, and around it, half-formed from light and shadow, stood figures. Not solid, not ghosts. Memories given shape. Daniel gasped. Those are the first builders, Lyria said softly. The humans who carved this station from scrap and hope. They never left. They became part of it. One figure turned, a woman with short hair and kind eyes wearing an old-style engineer's suit. She looked at Lyria and smiled. You hear us? Her voice echoed, not in sound, but in feeling. I do, Lyria replied. The hollow is gone, but the silence remains. Not outside. Inside. In the hearts of those who forget why they build, why they stay, why they care. Then we remind them, Lyria said, you cannot do it alone. I'm not alone. She stepped forward, placing her hand on the reactor. Instantly, the blue light surged up her arm, wrapping around her like a second skin. Images flooded her mind. Colonists planting the first garden, children drawing on bulkheads, lovers meeting under fake stars. All the small acts that made Viridia more than steel. But then another image came. Darker. A ship, vast and silent, drifting at the edge of known space, its hull marked with symbols older than the Star Weavers. And inside it, waiting, the true silence, not the hollow, but what created it. Lyria staggered back, breathless. What is it? Daniel asked, catching her. The source, she whispered. The silence wasn't an accident. It was a weapon, and someone left it running. Ember landed on her shoulder, his warmth grounding her. Daniel looked at the memory figures. What do we do? The lead figure stepped closer. The station is awake, but it needs a voice. Not just to speak for it, but to sing with it. Lyria understood. The station wasn't just a place. It was alive with the echoes of everyone who had ever called it home, and now it needed someone to carry that song forward, but she couldn't do it from here. She turned to Daniel. I have to go. Where to the edge? To the ship that started it all? You can't go alone. I won't be, she said, touching his arm, but you don't have to come. This isn't your war. Daniel looked at her, then at Ember, then at the glowing core. You said home is people who stand with you, he said. So I'm standing. Lyria's eyes shimmered. The memory figures bowed their heads. Then go, and carry our song with you. As they left the core, the station lights brightened behind them as if in farewell. Back in the upper decks, they found Vector waiting. He stood near the main bay, arms crossed, face unreadable. I felt it, he said. The station woke up. It did, Lyria said. And you are leaving. Yes. Vector was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. My ship will take you. Daniel frowned. Why? Because my ancestors served the Star Weavers. And for too long we forgot our duty. Today we remember. Lyria bowed her head. Thank you. Preparations moved quickly. Vector's warship powered up, its black hull now gleaming under Viridia's new star. Station crew brought supplies, food, water, old Earth music chips, even a blanket woven by Maya and a few others. Elise approached Daniel before boarding. You sure about this? No, he said. But I'm sure about her. Elise nodded. Then go make some new stories. As they stood on the ramp, Lyria looked back at Viridia. It no longer looked like a rusted nail in the void. It looked like a home. Ember nuzzled her cheek. We are ready. Daniel took her hand. Wherever you go, I go. She squeezed his hand. Then let's go wake the stars. The ship lifted off smooth and silent. Below, the people of Viridia watched it go, not with fear, but with hope. And far ahead, at the edge of everything, the silent ship waited. But this time, it would not be alone. This time it would hear a song of home. The journey to the edge of known space took 17 cycles. The Qatari warship moved through the void like a shadow given purpose. Its engines silent, its crew focused. Vector rarely spoke, but his orders were clear. Protect the singer. Lyria spent most of the time in the observation blister at the ship's nose, watching the stars blur into streaks of light. Ember stayed with her, curled around her shoulders or resting in her lap, his warmth a constant comfort. Daniel joined her whenever his shift allowed, bringing food, quiet company, and sometimes just sitting in silence. They didn't talk much about what waited ahead. They didn't need to. They both knew the silent ship wasn't just a vessel. It was a tomb, a machine. a memory, and it held the source of the great silence. On the final approach, the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. Space grew still. No comms chatter, no distant freighters, not even cosmic dust. Just empty black stretching forever. Then they saw it. The ship was enormous, longer than 3 stations lined end to end. Its hull was smooth, seamless, made of a metal that drank the light. No windows. No markings. Just a single opening at its center, like a mouth waiting to speak. Vector's voice came over the comm. Sensors show no power, no life signs. But the structure is intact. Older than any known civilization, Lyria stood. It's not dead. It's sleeping. Daniel stood beside her. What do we do? Wake it gently, she said. They boarded in a small shuttle, just the 3 of them. Lyria, Daniel, and Ember. Vector remained on the warship, ready to pull them out if things went wrong. The air inside the silent ship was cold and dry, but not empty. It hummed with a low vibration, like a heartbeat slowed to near stillness. The walls were featureless, yet they seemed to watch. As they walked deeper, images began to form in the air, flickering scenes from long ago. Starweavers weaving light into constellations, Qatari warriors kneeling before elven sages, humans launching their first ships into the unknown, all the moments when species reached for each other instead of weapons. Then the images changed. Fear, war, betrayal. The Starweavers accused of causing the silence, worlds turning away from one another, the slow unraveling of trust, and at the center of it all a single command buried in the ship's core: isolate, preserve, wait. It wasn't a weapon. It was a failsafe, built by the first alliance of species to protect the galaxy from itself. But when fear spread, the ship misunderstood. It didn't just isolate threats, it isolated everything. It began erasing connections, memories, even stars to prevent conflict. The hollow wasn't its creation, it was its mistake. A void born from too much silence. Lyria stopped in the heart of the ship, a vast chamber filled with floating orbs of light. Each one held a memory, a world, a song, but most were dim, flickering weakly. "This is the archive," she whispered. "The last record of what we were." Daniel looked around. "Can we fix it? Not by force," Lyria said. "Only by remembering." She stepped forward, placing her hands on the central console, a smooth surface that responded to her touch with a soft glow. Ember leapt onto the console, his scales reflecting the dim lights. Daniel didn't know what to do, so he did what he always did. He stood with her. Lyria closed her eyes and began to sing. Not a song of power, but of home. Of Viridia's cracked viewport. Of synth